at one point when I was in the craft, one of the archways became transparent. There were some technicians working on something else that I had no knowledge of. So, and also something began to scroll up on the screen. So it might have been possible that the skin of the craft, whether under, you know, electrical influence or something else, could at times become either transparent to look outside, or be used as some sort of video screen. That was pretty amazing. When I went outside and looked at it, it looked as if it was just a plain piece of metal again. A lot of people say, boy, it must have been exciting to go in there, and I always say it wasn't. It was a very ominous feeling. You really had because it's so, I know it sounds silly, but it's so unearthly in there. Nothing had a sharp edge to it. It was if the seats, the amplifiers that were in there, everything, as if it was made out of wax and heated for just a little bit and then cooled off. Everything had a smooth curve to it, even where a chair met the floor was blended into it. It was if the entire craft was injection molded.
Lazars uppgifter går inte att få bekräftade. 1990 blev han försatt i konkurs efter en koppleridom. I rätten uppgav han att han var egen företagare i fotobranschen. Frågan är om han verkligen arbetat på S4 eller om militären utnyttjat honom för att offentliggöra viss information om basen.
The notion that he would make a great patsy and he's the perfect scientist to work on such a project is interesting science fiction. In the first place, we have no reason to say he's a scientist. No diplomas, no papers, no memberships, nothing. In the second place, I worked on security for 14 years. People take security far more seriously than that. One of the strange statements he's made, there are only 22 people working on this thing. Well, you get more than that working on devising a new mousetrap for the government anyway. That makes no sense. And, you know, it has all the trimmings, his story, of a Walter Mitty story. Somebody in his imagination was, you know, stronger, brighter, faster than anybody else.
I did a variety of research relative to Bob Lazar. I actually met him. I obtained a copy of his, what they call a W-2 form, which is one of the IRS documents associated with pay. His particular form indicated that he worked for the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence. My investigation of this document and the claims that Bob Lazar made followed a very strict path of sound research. I contacted the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence and indeed verified that they were likely responsible for presenting that W-2. I investigated the issue with the Internal Revenue Service. They informed me the exact words were, it appears to be legit, that it was a genuine document. It was not something that had been fabricated. There were a variety of numbers, contract numbers and so forth issued on the document, which I was able to research, again finding that these were highly classified numbers. In fact, Internal Revenue Service ran into a brick wall when it came to trying to track down the actual employer associated with the document.
He gave me information about his background, educational background and employment background. I started with his claim to have worked at Los Alamos Lab. I figured, well, that's a good starting point. If he worked at Los Alamos, it's pretty likely that he had an education somewhere. They don't just hire people off the street. And if he worked at Los Alamos, especially on classified projects, it's at least reasonable to assume he could have been hired somewhere else in Nevada to work on similar projects. We went to Los Alamos and got nothing even close to cooperation. They wouldn't respond to our phone calls. They say, we have no information on Bob Lazar. There's nothing in the files. I said, are you sure now? No, nothing in the files. I showed them the phone book entry that Bob had kept that said he was there. I showed him the newspaper article that showed that he was there. Are you certain that you don't have a Bob Lazar? Well, maybe we had a Bob Lazar. Here's an ID number, but he didn't work for us. He worked for someone else. Basically, Los Alamos Lab tried to thwart me at every step. Were completely uncooperative in trying to get information about Bob, and I found that to be the case at every step of the way in trying to verify his background.
I'm the one that couldn't find any records or anything. I mean, I'm the one that brought that up because I was the first one to run into that. Initially, I couldn't get a hold of my birth certificate either, and that was one of the things that concerned me, is they might be trying to make me essentially a non-person.
I think it's most likely that Bob Lazar was indeed set up to be the conduit for certain information relating to this extraterrestrial project.
En gång fick Lazar se ett flygande tefat provflygas.
I was brought into the hangar for one of the short duration tests, and the craft was already outside on the lake bed and lifted off silently and was drifted around for a bit and set back down, and that was pretty much of a marvelous sight. It's a huge thing. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground quietly. It's just, you can't imagine the energy involved to do that and not to make any noise at all. There was some audio communication with the craft, and so I can only assume that there were humans on board, and somehow they had managed to squeeze themselves into those little seats or put something in there to sit on, and obviously they knew how to operate whatever controls there was, or fabricate their own, or retrofit it with something.
På 60-talet genomfördes ett antal rymdfärder med Apollo-raketer bemannade av USAs främsta astronauter. Frågan är om man samtidigt i Vita huset hade kännedom om andra mindre konventionella rymdfarkoster, till exempel flygande tefat. Edgar Mitchell deltog i färden med Apollo 14. Han var den sjätte människan på månen. Han har undersökt om flygande tefat verkligen kraschlandat på jorden och om man haft kontakt med utomjordingar. 1991 träffade han Bob Lazar.
I tend to believe that his basic story is true. That he was exposed to what he thought were alien craft and attempts to engineer and back engineer. I think that his explanation of what's going on and his theory that he's utilizing is probably not on target. What I think is credible is the fact that he was there. Since the Roswell incident in 1947, that there was a cover-up, that was a valid incident, and that there has been an active investigation program, reverse engineering program, and cover-up associated with that since that time.
Bob Lazar hade bara varit på S4 i några månader när han berättade om sitt arbete på basen för vännen Gene Huff i strid mot alla säkerhetsföreskrifter.
My reaction was to, without pressing him against his will, find out more, get him to tell me anything I could. And it wasn't disbelief. I think I was actually motivated to further read. I started investigating other books on UFOs and other researchers' information to see if anyone knew anything, and needless to say, they didn't know what Bob knew.
En månad senare, i mars 1989, gick Lazar längre. Han tog då med sig några vänner till öknen utanför basen för att där låta dem bevittna provflygningen av ett tefat.
I had remembered most of the days and times of testing. So I believe it was 8 or 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, somewhere in March '89, I believe. We went out with Gene Huff, my ex-wife, and John Lear. Shortly after the flight time that I had recorded, white light came up off the ground and hovered, and then began doing radical step maneuvers and darting from one side of the sky to the other, doing some impossible flight characteristics. But at times the craft had, glowed tremendously bright, where we thought, being miles and miles away, we thought there was something wrong and the craft was going to explode, so much so that we all got behind the car.
It actually came closer. It came down the mountain range toward us to where we could actually see it was elliptically shaped. It looked like something that, it's strange to explain. It looks like an explosion that starts to explode and stops and doesn't explode and dissipate. That's how bright the light is. Your brain interprets it as an explosion about to happen.
Tredje gången Bob Lazar var ute och tittade på provflygningar med sina vänner blev han gripen. Han förhördes på hemlig ort och kom sen aldrig tillbaka till område 51.
They threatened my wife, they threatened to kill my wife. They said they'd stop at nothing. They said they thought they made that very clear. They couldn't believe that I had taken anyone out there to show them that, much less left with information like the flight test data, and wanted to know what else I had said, who else I had told specifically.
Security agents from the OFI, the Office of Federal Investigation, had been witnessed doing random security checks at his house. There was almost no question in anyone's mind, anyone in Bob's immediate life who talked with him on the telephone, that his phone was tapped. I mean, strange things would happen on Bob's phone and really continue to this day.
Dennis Mariani, who was my supervisor, called, and all he said was, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And that was the end of the phone call. They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.